chat all things cybersecurity, as always, answering your questions. Thursday evening, Cybersecurity Q&A live, hopefully as good as the one on Tuesday. So, as always, the goal is to answer any of your questions. I think, we've been talking a lot about it. I've been in cybersecurity for over 10 years and pretty much covered every single position possible until I got to the leadership. But those of you who are starting your journey, I think a lot of people are struggling to understand what it takes to break into cybersecurity. There's probably too much information. There's too many misconceptions and people are really struggling. So, these live sessions, I guess, is a way for us to remove some of the misconceptions and, help you guys and answer some of the questions about cybersecurity career and help you and guide you in that journey. So buckle up. We got about an hour to chat and answer all your questions. As always, chat is always open. I'll go in chronological order and try and answer all of your questions, guys. So welcome had all of you joining. I'm gonna spend the next hour having some fun and answering some hopefully great questions, guys. We can see we got some people coming in. Great stuff. Welcome, guys. Few information, I guess, especially, people joining through different platforms. As always say, if you guys are on YouTube, make sure you follow in my TikTok, where we drop, pretty much daily some, I guess, great nuggets and pieces of information. Those of you who are on TikTok, make sure you're following our YouTube, where you have all of the blueprints and all of the, roadmaps for pretty much every single cybersecurity career. I think I mentioned in the last live stream, probably my most difficult and hardest question to answer, most of you guys. It's not, learning how to investigate incidents. It's not, learning and passing Security Plus. Is first of all, probably figure out what role you want to do. What's the best for your personality, for your previous career. So I've just recorded the video today on my YouTube. That's probably going to release next Monday. I just need to do some editing, but that video specifically was developed for that purpose, trying to answer the question about, what kind of personality you have, what skills and what previous career you might have had, and how does that translate into cybersecurity. So there's these three key questions that I try to answer with the video and essentially help you and guide you guys on that journey of deciding what is the best role to choose in your journey into cybersecurity. So that's gonna, as I said, that's gonna drop on Monday. So keep an eye on it. If you're not subscribing, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications on YouTube so you are aware when that drops. But yeah, we're gonna spend the next hour or so answering all of your questions. So as always, guys, drop questions in the chat, and I'm gonna go through them in due course and answer any of your questions that you might have, guys. Also, I think I mentioned, on my TikTok, there is a Linktree link, which has all of the links to my website. We have all the matrices. I dropped cybersecurity CV template as well to use, guys, if you need, and some other stuff. So there is also a link to my YouTube and everything. All of the links are there. So, what about a taxi driver to get into this field? Well, doesn't matter what you've done previously. You can get into cybersecurity from any field. It's just about, Suther, it's about understanding what you want to do, what kind of role is the best for you. So as I say, check out the video that on Monday that's going to drop. That's going to answer a lot of the questions about, picking the right path for you and what kind of personality and skills you might have. Yeah, so if you want to be SOC analyst, there's a full roadmap on my YouTube. Just watch, and I'll break it down. What certificates you need, what skills you need, how to build the best home lab, and all of that. Everything is explained pretty plainly. So check it out, and that's gonna help you on your journey to becoming a SOC analyst. Okay, good stuff. What if you decided and you've seen it? The hardest part is now is staying on that path and following the discipline. I think another thing which I commonly see time and time again, people asking questions or people what they're doing is people jumping from one path to another. They're studying a bit of pen testing, they're studying a bit of SOC, they're studying a bit of GRC. It's about discipline and sticking to one path for 9 months. That's the one that's going to deliver the most results. And that's the hardest part. You have to stick to your guns, persevere, and discipline yourself and be, in that path. Lucas says, hey man, what are your certs? What do you mean, what are your certs? Not sure what you mean by that, Lucas. Question. Do you mean what certificates do I have? Is that what you're asking? I got too many probably certificates to list, but I don't even probably remember. The thing is, I've been in cybersecurity leadership, so I haven't done many certifications in the last few years, but I can cover some of them. Let me actually have a look in my profile. What I have, and I can tell you guys. 2 seconds. Let me put it up because I've done quite a few. So let me walk through them. I think it's in here. Is it in here? No, not in here. License certifications. There we go. So I've got CISM, I got CISSP, I've got Microsoft 365 Security Admin, which I think was MS500. I've got ISO 27001 Lead Implementer. I got AZ500. I got Azure Solutions Architect. I got Certified Kubernetes Security Specialist, Certified Kubernetes Administrator. I've got CCSK. I've got Terraform Associate, CompTIA Pentest Plus, CYSA Plus, Security Plus, Crest CPSA, Azure Security Specialty, EJPT. What else was got? I think that's kind of the main ones. There's loads of other bits and bobs, but that's kind of the main ones. But it's not about certificates. It's all about skills, guys. Nowadays, I think that's one thing that's really a big misconception. People chasing certificates, which is not necessarily the most important part. It's about having the right skills. That's really gonna change your perspective and change your career trajectory. Salary range, Costco says, it really depends on the role. There is no salary range for cybersecurity as such. So every specific role has its own salary range. And I talked a lot about this in the next video that comes out and explaining, every single one. Hello, Prime Classic. Between pen testing and GRC, which do you recommend? I don't recommend anything, Prime Classic. The only person who can choose is yourself. What best aligns to you. But if I pick the two opposites, pen testing is the hardest and the longest roadmap to get to. GRC is probably, kind of in between, and it's half probably the length to get in, and salary wise is kind of up there. No computer science degree is definitely not necessary to get into SEC. Mike says, what programming language is the best or most important for cybersecurity? There isn't one. And, the only programming language you need is Python, but that's only specifically for pen test or security engineering. The rest is, you just need to be, I guess, proficient in things like Bash and PowerShell. But other than that, you don't need to learn programming languages as such. I'm not, blessed Alloy, I'm not teaching anything cybersecurity wise. Where's the best place to get the skills apart from TryHackMe and how it works? Building your own home lab. That's the best thing you could ever do. How many GitHub projects should I do in order to become SOC? I would say about 5, John. 5 is, I've talked about, 5 good ones is kind of enough. Venom says, is it easy to get jobs in cybersecurity if I get certificate this year? No, definitely not easy. And certificates don't get you jobs with them. Pen test harder than red teaming. Pen testing and red teaming is one and the same thing. Tiki-toki. How beneficial is a top secret clearance in this industry? It's only beneficial if you're going to go work for government. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. Because top clearance is only applicable if you're going to work for public service or government jobs. Yes, I live in the UK. How learn? You don't learn cybersecurity. You learn specific role, roadmap, and skills. Does Camel say, I'm doing first line IT in an MSP. What's my best route to get in cybersecurity? There is no best route to get in cybersecurity. You need to figure out what you want to do in cybersecurity first. Because, I keep kind of talking back and forth about the same thing. Guys, there is no such thing as getting into cybersecurity. When you get into cybersecurity, you get into a specific role. Getting into cybersecurity is an industry and a field, and you can't just get into cybersecurity. You have to pick a path and a role. Do red team or blue team will become... None of them will become oversaturated. Yeah, but pen testing or offensive is the same thing, Tiki-toki. There is no difference between either of them. Where does one start with the reverse engineering malware? Well, I guess you need to learn the fundamentals, learn the digital forensics, and, learn... that one requires a lot. Reverse malware engineering is probably, even harder than getting into pen testing, but you need to learn languages. You need to learn things like C++, C#, learn digital forensics, learn networking, learn how software is developed. So, there's a lot of things to go in there. Given, Honey Badger says, given the amount of zero-day findings Mythos found, do you worry about the future of cybersecurity? No, not one bit. Mythos is just a crap marketing ploy. Mythos is, I'm not worried one bit about Mythos. I think anyone who's worried about Mythos don't know nothing about cybersecurity. There's nothing to be worried about. Have you heard about Jane Franklin MBE? She's been advising that it's very difficult to get into. Yes, of course, I know Jane Franklin. Well, of course it's hard to get in. Anyone who says that it's easy to get into cybersecurity is hard. But the biggest problem is, guys, why it's hard? Because most of the people are learning and doing stuff that doesn't help them. Degree doesn't help you get into cybersecurity. Passing 20 certificates doesn't help you. So... Which team do you prefer to do more? I don't prefer any of them. I'm in leadership, so I don't do either blue or red team. Yeah, of course, yeah. There's loads of crap information about cybersecurity, That's why I'm doing this, because, people are keep asking same questions, which, just tells me they, most of these people, you guys do not understand one bit about cybersecurity and what it takes to get into it. Yeah. It's not only supply chain. I spoke about this in the last live stream, and I guess I'll repeat because probably there's loads of new people here. There is a reason why I'm not worried about Mythos. First of all, there's one thing that's been missed of the headlines. Yes, Mythos, they didn't find massive. They found a couple of 0 days. But what nobody talks about is it costs $20,000 in API calls and tokens to find those vulnerabilities. That's a massively expensive thing. And secondly, most of the hackers, they don't need 0 days. Hackers don't use 0 days to hack in your environment, guys. Pick, for example, Scattered Spider. So the guys who breached Marks and Spencer's. The way they operate is, so Scattered Spider, what they do is they buy credentials been stolen from info stealers. Info stealers is such a kind of malware that steals credentials. And what they do is they get those credentials, even though they could be 5 years out of date. They change, using AI voice clone, they change their voice to an 18-year-old girl. They call the help desk of that company and ask for the password to be reset. They don't need to hack. Social engineering is 10 times easier. They just log into your environment and then use skills to, for lateral movement, privilege escalation, then dropping ransomware. So they don't need methods to do all of that. What are the area cloud security analysts should specialize in? Well, there's not one specific area you should specialize. You should learn everything about what there is about cloud security. But you need to understand a couple of things. It depends where. Again, all these questions are very vague because it's hard to say where you specialize and what you should do. Because I don't know what background you come from, what have you learned previously, and where your skills and knowledge are at. Because that answer really, depends. So, you should definitely learn networking. You should definitely learn cloud fundamentals. You should definitely learn, depending where you want to start your journey, but you should pass AWS Security Specialty or AZ500. Then you should learn infrastructure as code languages such as Terraform, because nobody's deploying cloud security controls through graphical interface. So there's a lot of things that you need to learn. Hi, which cybersecurity team suggests blue or red team? Definitely blue, because red is 10 times harder and it's near impossible to get in. Only thing that worries me about these AI tools is there's so much red tape. There's no, really. It depends. It depends where you are at. Winner says, I just passed my Net Plus, Sec Plus. Now, is there a job I can get with those quals? No. If you just pass these 2 certificates, you have no chance of getting a job without the skills. Working on a degree in cyber now, what would be a good area to start work towards pen testing? Building a home lab, jumping into Hack the Box, try Hack Me, and then building a home lab and trying to learn how to, breach loads of machines. And then, the thing is, you can do a degree, it doesn't matter, but you're still going to need OSCP. OSCP in pen testing is the gold standard. And you need to learn how to hack Active Directory. You need to, learn, there's about 300 to 500 hours that you need to put in to get to OSCP level. Kane says, I'm currently software dev with a BS in Comp Sci. How can I start to pivot in cybersecurity? Well, you first need to figure out what you want to do in cybersecurity. And then just follow one of the roadmaps on my YouTube. Pen testing, John Dill, is about, I think the roadmap I've built is between 14 to 18 months. Learning. Good stuff, Camel. Best way to get an internship. Apply for one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Mythos is nothing more than the marketing stuff. Because the thing is, Anthropic still doesn't make any profit, so they have to do stuff. Who do you think has the best approach, SSC or SAW? It really depends on the environment. There's no one best approach. Atom says, I did IR for MNS. They just socially engineered the TCS third-party IT. Yeah, exactly. But it's still social engineering, and that's how they normally get in. Do you see any areas of cyber becoming oversaturated? No, none of them becoming oversaturated. Yeah. Well, but the thing is, yeah, as you say, whether they go GLR, whether they go co-op, it's always, they find the weakest link. And then it's just about, it's so much easier to go through social engineering than trying to build and hack your way in. I'm starting college this fall in associate in arts. Build a home lab. Victor says, what would you recommend someone that is finishing the summer 2 years of network? Home lab. That's the most important thing you can do. Can the government hack my phone? Of course they can. BSA says, what background makes the best red team operator? Well, anything to do with engineering is the best, because obviously, those the kind of skills, are the best translating. Because anyone who loves, breaking things apart and putting things together and understanding how things work, that kind of lends itself best for pen testing, red teaming, whatever you call it. Do people with military cybersecurity experience do well? Yeah, of course. Yeah, military is a great, learning place. Look at Israel. Israel has a, great military training facility for cybersecurity specialists, and people go and do really well. Yeah, of course. Yeah, having the degree is not going to get you anywhere nowadays, Atom. Yeah, right. Ken says, what are your thoughts on biometrics being needed for LinkedIn? Well, it's not needed, but it's about you can do whatever you want to do, but setting up two-factor authentication is an important part. Because nowadays, just having a password is not enough. Especially people are reusing those passwords because they're going to appear in one of the leaks. So very easy, especially if you worked hard to build up your LinkedIn, to lose it. So any application that's relatively important to you, having two-factor authentication is very important to have. How long is the cloud security roadmap? I think it's between 10 and 12 months, something like that. Okay. What do you lead? I lead a cybersecurity team. And I lead the whole business cybersecurity function. So I work for a fintech business, and essentially I build the cybersecurity strategy. I build the team from the ground up, built our business cybersecurity strategy, all of the compliance and regulatory requirements, and report to the board about what is the most important cyber risks that we need to address in the near future. That's essentially what a CISO does. Yeah, no problem, BSA, no problem. FQR says, so I'm in high school and I can't decide, should I do IT intern over summer or work a regular job? Well, it depends what you want to do. If you want to go into cyber, if you want to work in technology, any kind of IT related internship is going to be invaluable to you and is going to help you loads of, and bring more opportunities in the future than doing a regular job. So, you need to decide what kind of skills and what experience lends itself in a future career. Yeah, exactly. What to say? Where was I? Since cloud is relatively new, do you see it being replaced by something else in the next 20 years or so? Yeah, probably. I always say, one thing that we can never, negate inside, especially in cybersecurity and technology, things change, Computers are relatively new, they kind of became widely used last 30 years or so. Technology evolve and change. So of course things are going to change. But that's why I say, cyber and tech, unless you are the person who loves continuously learning and keeping up with the skills and knowledge, you're going to be left behind. This is the career, where continuous development, learning new attack paths, learning new tools, new technologies is very important if you want to progress and build a flourishing career. Because if you don't, you're going to be left behind very quickly. This is a bad wording, but what is the cybersec job where you have lots of downtime between working? Well, any non-technical, there's loads of jobs. Cloud security engineering, you have downtime. GRC analyst, you have downtime. IM analyst, you have downtime. The only jobs that you are kind of, potentially on call at work extended hours is, anything to do with incident response, anything SOC potentially you can be on call shifts. But, other than that, most of the jobs are, just normal jobs doing 9 to 5. Epic says, what should I be making associate in cyber back? It depends what kind of role you're going to do, Epic. Depends what kind of experience you have. There is no benchmark that you could be making because you don't have no cybersecurity experience. So you still start from scratch. But depending on what skills you're going to develop and what role you're going to start at, there's a fairly decent salary range, and you can never answer that. Rage says, why do cybersecurity influencers keep saying AI will take over SOC analysts or pen testing? Is it true? No, it's not true. I think people, I don't believe the AI hype, and I don't believe AI is taking over jobs. Well, I mean, AI is not AI is going to make some changes, but AI is not removing the necessity for SOC analysts. The only thing I think what AI is going to replace is AI replacing sort of menial, low-level tasks that SOC analysts do, which is kind of, they're covering more sort of level 1 tasks, but it's not removing SOC analyst expertise needed in general. The same as from pen testing. Yes, AI can do pen testing, but the thing is, for example, I'll give you a very simple example. Like my organization, we contractually are obligated to do pen tests for our clients' platforms, but these pen tests has to be CREST certified. No AI pen testing company could get CREST certification because they're not using humans to test, and this AI thing can't be CREST certified. So yes, you can probably use AI in between the real human testing, but it's not going to disappear. And I always say, one thing, the common phrase I keep using is that AI is a tool. So AI is a force multiplier. It's not a human replacer. But what must add is that people who know how to use AI would replace those who can't use AI. But AI can't replace people. Dudek says, I'm building a home lab and was wondering if using AI to assist me is okay. Well, that's where the real problem starts. You can use AI, but the problem is nowadays, and that's where the real problem occurs, I see with people, is they ask every single question AI to help them with, and then they don't know how to think or learn. So yes, you can build, your home lab using AI, but then you're going to walk into an interview and they're going to ask you to explain deeply why you built this home lab, how you built it, how you investigated things. And if you've done everything with AI, I bet you're not going to be able to answer half of these questions. And that's the key difference. AI, yes, can help you, but can never replace your thinking, understanding, and knowledge. AI is your helper, but if you overuse it and you substitute your thinking with AI, you're going to really struggle. Yeah. Well, Atom says, I always found degrees in cyber just couldn't keep their curriculum updated in line with cyber. Yeah, the main thing, Atom, for that is loads of people who don't understand. In order for you to build a degree program, it takes minimum 5 years. So by the time you do that degree in university, it's 5 years out of date. And the thing is, and secondly, most of the cybersecurity degrees, they cover theory. You can learn theory from Security Plus. The most important thing nowadays is having skills. Michael says, but I have master's degree in political science and CYSA plus Security Plus, A plus, and 17 good SOC projects suggested by you. That shows how backward Germany is. Yeah, some countries still, are hell bent and ask for degrees. But then again, I would question it because there are loads of job specs that ask for degrees in UK too. But that's more of a like HR tick box filter that's not been said by hiring managers. It's because a filter because they don't know how else to filter out jobs. And Michael's always talk about, there are ways to go around it. Now, if you talk to a hiring manager, they might neglect your lack of degree if you are an amazing person who's got skills. I always say, guys, there are other ways to find jobs that rather than just directly applying. You can find jobs otherwise. Yeah, but you see, you probably the problem is this is government job, and that's why government they're crazy for that stuff. But if you go for a private company, degree might won't matter, Michael. Security administrator, good first job. Yes, of course. Blade says, I'm applying for cybersecurity or IT apprenticeships right now. Okay, good stuff. I'm an IT coordinator making 75K. Yeah, great stuff. Great stuff, Epic. The most important thing, Blade, in here from that list is you can have labs, you can have projects, but how are they documented and how people are perceiving and looking at those, home labs, how you're explaining to potential hiring managers, that's the real differentiator between potentially landing an interview or not. We have the Defender Copilot giving us my information alert and why in most cases it's crap. Yeah, I'm not surprised that yeah. A Copilot, especially, if you compare a Copilot to something like Claude, it's miles behind. Bro, I put CyberArk creds into a phishing email. Am I cooked? Potentially, Jacob, you could be cooked. Yeah, that's a big no. But it depends, I guess, how quickly they could be used. If you can reset those credentials, you might be okay. Seba says, is getting a degree a waste? Yes, definitely. CPT says, bro skips technical cues. Yeah, but you're asking some nonsense. Give me a common vulnerability in C. I'm answering career questions. I'm not answering your technical nonsense. If you know vulnerability in C, then be good. I'm in cybersecurity. I'm a CISO. Do you think CISOs go and research vulnerabilities in C? That doesn't make any sense. You think you're being clever here. My degree in cybersecurity got me in the door. Cool. Yeah. It might get you in the door, but it doesn't always necessarily the end of, it is. What alternative path besides enter into entry for cyber are the best? Well, there's definitely, there's different other paths, Seba. You can go via help desk. You can work in, sysadmin jobs. There's all other people, who come completely new to the industry. Starting somewhere in IT is another great way to build the necessary skills, and stuff like that. I feel tired of bypassing AI to get what I want. Is there any tool, I assume, that just customize your prompt auto? Probably there is. I haven't, done much research into that. I'm about to graduate this year. What should my next step be? Should I start mass applying for jobs? You should build a home lab and gain the necessary skills. That's the most important thing that you need to do. Do companies tend to overlook degrees for experience? Yeah, I think so. You know, most of the leaders that I talk with, you know, I know hundreds of CISOs who hire teams, you know. It's not necessarily experience, it's the skills and knowledge that was way more important than new certificates and degrees. Who else was there? Hi, Marius. Greetings from Kenya. Always learning something new every time from you. Yeah, good stuff. Good to see you, Sang. Welcome, welcome. OCP says, what are the steps to make career in Cyber Command? Cyber Command? What is that? There is no part that's most important. Every part is important. CPT, I've been in cybersecurity for 10 years, and I've done very, very well without cybersecurity degree. Should I start government, then go corporate? It depends, you know, government, yes, but you know, government is probably, you can, it depends where you land and what you're going to do. Because half of the government jobs are, you know, boring and very limited in what you're going to learn. So, you know, there's no easy answer here, I guess. You know, it all depends on the circumstances and the role you're going to end yourself in. Yon says, should I start with A+ and work my way up to cybersecurity? Yes, if you're completely new, yes, you definitely need to start with the, you know, complete basics. Is Linux an important skill to learn? Yes, 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 indeed. Especially, you know, going into cloud, 99% of the servers in the cloud are running on Linux. Oh, I see. I've been offered a 2200-hour junior support technician placement, and they told me the interview was only to see if I'm likable as I've passed technicalities. Yeah, well, there's loads of these kind of interviews, you know, where, you know, interviews sometimes is nothing more than to see how you fit in within the team, what your personality is like. Because if you got the technical qualities, you know, that answer is pretty easy, especially, you know, on a support kind of junior roles. You don't need to know much. You just need to be, you know, to understand what kind of person you are. I'm a red team operator, 24 years old, no degree and no high school diploma. Yeah, of course. You know, it can be done. I've seen many people doing. Yeah, of course it could be true, Blade. Yeah, definitely. Do you think getting a degree is useful if it's free for me? I mean, if it's free, obviously it's never going to hurt. But, you know, I always talk about, you know, this kind of degree thing. You know, if it's free, yes, maybe it's a bit different kind of equation. But always think about, guys, look, degree, it takes 3 years for you to pass a degree. Yeah. I always talk about most of my roadmaps. For example, what I did is I got my first cybersecurity role when I built my own learning path. Got my first job in 8 months. So compare 8 months versus 3 years. That's a massive difference, you know. So not only, I mean, if you're getting free, that's a different calculation. But for example, I'll give you a UK calculation. University is £27,000. That's the kind of debt you're going to have coming out of university. And you're going to be 2 years behind. The person who's done a self-learning path already going to be 2 years in work with 2 years worth of experience. So, you know, it's a massive difference. Alex, you should build a home lab. That's the most important thing. Have you done pen testing? Oh, very long time ago. I didn't really work in pen testing role. I've done pen testing strategies, and I did some, you know, bits and bobs of pen testing. Like I used to do some tests when I was working in engineering, but that was a long time ago. You know, I started my career in SOCs. I then worked in cloud security engineering, cloud security architecture, and stuff like that. You know. Matthias says, "Would you recommend cybersecurity now over software engineering?" Well, I'm always going to recommend cybersecurity because that's why, that's the route I went in. Do you think it's better getting an internship or a full-time job already if possible? Full-time job, of course. CEH or GCIH? Lati, CEH is the worst certificate on the planet. What else was there? Guess what? I'm thinking of moving from Berlin, Germany to UK, so I can work for you. Eye for the skills. Yeah, that would sound great, Michael. So currently, I don't have any roles, and I couldn't employ you for now. Tips for someone a few years into GRC looking to make a GitHub portfolio. Well, pick a fictional organization, do a risk assessment. Do, for example, ISO 27001 Annex A control assessment on a GitHub portfolio for GRC. Write a couple of security policies. That's the kind of thing that's really going to stand out and make you, good for GRC. How many years of experience have you got, John? I've got 10 years worth of experience. I've been 10 years into cybersecurity, John. You know much about CRA? I don't know what you mean by CRA, because the thing is, there's so many different acronyms nowadays in cybercam, so I'm not sure what you mean by CRA. How does one build up into a CISO role? That's my goal. There's not many female CISOs. Yes, it is. That's really a hard question to answer because, I get a lot of, especially LinkedIn people asking how to move into becoming a CISO or, any cyber leadership. Problem is, there's no really kind of a path or roadmap. You can't do a certificate to become a CISO. So it's about, hedging your opportunities. It's about learning the next sort of level of skills because CISO, you have to be a great storyteller. You have to learn how to influence people. You have to be comfortable being on stage and presenting in front of people. It's about stacking those skills. It's about learning how to build cyber programs. So there are some great books, for example, CISO Compass. What else I've read before? CISO Compass, CISO something else. For example, I read a great book, Influence, by an ex-FBI negotiator, talking about how to negotiate and influence people. For example, amazing book is Smartest Person in a Room to teach you about empathy and understanding other people. Personal MBA is a great book when you go into leadership to learn about how to, how business works, understand the finance part, how the budgets work, how to build your cyber strategy that aligns to the budgets and requirements, when to ask for budgets, when to not. So these are the kind of things that you need to work towards and, then try and find opportunities. Is GovTech worth it? I've heard bad things. I wouldn't work in any government jobs, Blade, but everyone's to their own. I think probably in US is a bit different, but for example in UK, government jobs pay crap money. They're absolutely worthless. I would never work in a government job. They're looking for CISOs for 80K. That's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff, tribes. Nichita says, I'm in 5th year of secondary school, Ireland, and I'm thinking of working in this field. Is it too early? It's never too early. You can start learning about IT and technology and start building the necessary foundations, Nichita. So it's never too early. You can start as early as you want. I have a hands-on, Sunny says, I've got hands-on experience in cybersecurity as a SOC analyst and ethical hacking. I don't know what the question was. So what do you think about... I already answered that question about mythos, but it's nothing to be worried, buds. Yeah, exactly, yeah. The marketing hype around this stuff is crazy. Yeah, exactly, Rage. Yeah, cybersecurity is way more stable than any software engineering jobs right now. What does salary progression look like? It really depends on the roles, Loggy. There's not one kind of linear answer, but I can talk to you about, so for example, my career. So I started working, but you have to bear in mind that this is all UK salaries, yeah. But so I started my first job in a SOC. I was on 50K. And within a year, I got promotion to 60K. And then within another year, so after 2 years, I moved within the same company, moved into cloud security engineering and architecture, and I moved into 85K. And then after a few more years of gaining cloud security engineering experience, DevSecOps kind of experience and stuff like that, I moved to a senior security engineer role in another company at 125K. And then when I got into leadership, there was another step up, which, I'm not necessarily going to share my current salary, but I got a couple of tens of grands of pay rise from then. But that's kind of, it all depends on the roles and, where you are in the world. They're all going to differ. But the thing is, nowadays, the one thing you have to be mindful that it's really hard to get decent pay rises if you stay long with the company. So I think, if progression stalls after 2-3 years, you just have to look at different roles and, move and find different opportunities elsewhere. Yeah, software engineering is going to become harder and harder. What's Penn says, is it okay if I'm struggling with theory? It's been my 4th month. What says I'm going to find Yeah, I mean, everyone goes through struggle. I always say, cybersecurity is such a weird thing, It takes months and months where you think like you have no clue until things start clicking. But you have to find a way to go and talk to people. I think the hardest part is what it is, Pen. I always say to people, if you're learning always by yourself, it's sometimes hard to uncover things and learn things. So, finding communities, finding people that you can chat to about things. And, I always say, the skill that you need to master, and one thing that's really going to help you in this journey is explaining difficult concepts to like a 7-year-old, teaching other people. Because when you can teach, for example, your mom, your sister, who are completely non-technical about cybersecurity things, that means you understand the topic really well. Or getting someone else to explain the topic to you so you get it. But that's kind of the things you need to look at. What else Trab says, do you think an automated CIS benchmark scanner made in Python is a decent project? Post on GitHub. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Any kind of automated testing is great stuff, as to assess against benchmarks, because automation is the one thing that companies always struggle with. Doing that manually is tedious and hard work. So if you can automate it and showcase you can do that and understand, it's a great thing to have. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, Blade. Yeah. I'm kind of worried more about this vibe coding nonsense, because the problem is, yes, vibe coding could be cool, but vibe coding is for you to build like an MVP to test something. Vibe coding is not for building a production grade systems. So, I always say AI is dangerous in the hands of the people who don't have a clue what they're doing. Because, yes, you can do vibe code, but unless you understand software engineering, like most of you guys probably tested and played around with vibe coding and stuff like that. But when the thing, when you discover a bug in it, unless you understand software, AI goes in circles and never really is able to fix these bugs properly. And that's a big gap. 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐭, I wouldn't recommend any branches. It's all about you to figure it out. Technologia says, what a good cybersec job that has a great life-work balance. Anything to do with GRC. What's your take on agentic AI for level 1 SOC analytics? Yeah, that's potentially the only one area which kind of in a way is going to affect a bit with AI. But you have to understand, this is more so for probably companies like MSPs and MSSPs. Normal companies, they're not really are able to deploy AI at such a scale, and especially smaller organizations. So, SOC is never going to go away. Yes, it might be harder to find really junior roles, but if you develop and build the necessary skills, sometimes you can even bypass the level 1 and go straight to level 2. Well, if you have to choose, Andre, between SOC analyst or cloud security, obviously cloud security is going to be more important. Blade says, I'm scared for the future. People are hiring wipe pen testers, not real engineers. Well, yeah, that's a really scary thought, you know. Is wipe that and wipe that, wipe SOC analysts, wipe pen testers, you know, wipe software engineers. I mean, it's a good in a way. The more companies gonna go into this vibe nonsense, the more crap they're gonna build. That means the more cyber jobs we're gonna have to go and fix all the crap that they made up. So in a way, it's not too bad, you know. There's gonna be too much vibe crapping stuff that you're gonna break stuff, and you know, it's gonna be more jobs for us to go and fix. But the one thing I always mention, guys, I think, you know, it doesn't matter in what role you are working towards. Learning AI security fundamentals is a great skill differentiator, because every single company is deploying AI, this AI, that. So you learning, you know, the fundamentals, you know, how to secure AI, how to use it, what kind of risks it brings. It really, you know, can elevate your, you know, hireability and your knowledge, and take you to, you know, newer heights in the career journey. Tips on breaking into cybersecurity. Well, Logan, all you need to do is just get a Security Plus and then build a home lab and acquire the necessary skills to take that leap into cybersecurity from help desk. But, you know, you got the IT basics covered, get a Security Plus cert and build a home lab. And if you want to go to cloud security, the same thing applies. So yeah, just building a home lab, building projects, learning cloud security fundamentals. You know, on Security Plus on top of it, you probably need to get one of the cloud security certs, you know, whether it's AWS Security Specialty or AZ500, something like that. Ronan says, are you familiar with the cybersecurity company Sphere? I don't think I've heard about it before. No, I don't think, Ronan. What are some of the requirements for its admin role? I don't really know much about IT kind of level roles, but you know, you probably need to understand, you know, you covering stuff like A+ from Professor Messer on YouTube and Network Plus gives you a solid foundation, and then you probably need to go a bit deeper in kind of operating systems, understanding login and technologies. You know, it kind of covers most of the stuff for sysadmin. If you had to start out over, how would you go about getting a career in ethical hacking? Noah, if I had to start over, I would never in my life pick career in ethical hacking. That's the one thing for sure. Is bug bounty worth it for learning? I have a international CTF in preparing for, and I feel lost. I'm going against 8 years older than me. I mean, doing any CTFs, bug bounties, isn't it a great way to level up your skills? You know, you're always gonna, you know, anything that delivers potential knowledge and learning opportunities and competitions, it's a fun way to learn. But yeah, bug bounty programs, especially, you know, joining stuff like HackerOne, Bugcrowd, you know, potentially making even some cash on the side and learning about new types of vulnerabilities and sharpening your skills. It's always a welcome thing. Yeah, of course, Blade. What's your opinion on OSCP? OSCP is a gold standard SIN on anything if you want to go into pen testing. So OSCP is the sort of the granddaddy of the pen testing certificates. Yeah, Monas, go for a question. The more crap to fix and the harder it will get for AI to fix. Yeah. Study tips on passing Security Plus. Logan, the most important thing what you need to do is jump on Udemy, get Jason Dion is a great, he's got some great practice exams on Udemy. They're about 15 quid or $20 or something like that. And do them. You know, once you comfortably get 80% plus on practice exams, book the real deal. Good entry roles after cybersecurity degree that aren't SOC analyst. Anything to do with GRC, you know, not necessarily have to be SOC analyst. There's loads of generic sort of cybersecurity analyst roles that are great for it. GRC potentially. So yeah, that's the kind of places to start. You can probably even look at even cloud security engineering and in some junior level stuff, Dennis. What else? Do you have any cert recommendations for someone with a degree and a few years work experience in GRC? I'm waiting to do some ISACA certs, but looking for something to fill the gap. If you haven't done, have a look at CCSK Tribes. That's a great kind of cert to plug some of the cloud security knowledge, and it kind of showcases about how to transfer technical and governance control between different cloud providers and frameworks. CCSK is great stuff to do, especially for GRC. Second year software engineering student thinking of switching to cybersecurity. Your opinion? Yeah, it's a great shout, Mattia. Yeah. Living proof. Roughly how long do you think it would take a beginner to break in with the correct roadmap? I've done it myself, living proof. So my roadmap into cybersecurity from 0 to a first SOC analyst job was 8 months. So anything, I always say, being realistic, anything anywhere between 9 to 12 months is realistic. Does both SOC and IAM projects on GitHub look negative to hiring manager? I wouldn't say they look negative, but you have to be mindful about, I always say, the one thing you have to be mindful of, what kind of picture you're trying to paint. Because the thing is, if you're doing too much of a mishmash, that means this guy doesn't have discipline and it doesn't know his trajectory. If you're doing too much different things, then, it kind of detracts for the role you're applying. But, you can have some IAM projects. IAM is identity, I always say, is the new perimeter in cybersecurity. And identity is going to be a really important aspect in the near future. That's why I think, IAM is such a overlooked career path that more and more organizations are going to hire IAM analysts. And probably the starting salary is even better than SOC. So in some ways, that's even probably greater a starting point than SOC. No, Mythos is never going to affect anything, living proof. Mona says, if you want to become an average ethical hacker, can you learn from free resources? You can learn from free resources, but the one thing that you can't neglect, Mona, so you're still going to need to do OSCP. That's probably one of the most important things that you're going to do, and it's probably the most costly thing that will, you'll do on that journey. But yeah, most of the stuff is free. Building home labs, like the box is, a couple of bucks a month. Blade says, do you think for pen testing it's too saturated? I don't think it's too saturated, but I think, Blade, I think pen testing, I always say, pen testing is the hardest and the longest career path to break in. So, yes, you can do it. Of course you can do it, but it's the most expensive and it's the hardest, and it's really hard to break in because pen testing is not really kind of an entry-level role. So if you build enough skills, knowledge and expertise, you can certainly break into it. But you have to think, if you got 2 years worth of time to really hone in those skills, then yeah, pen testing could be a great career path. But I always think, I think people choose pen testing for the wrong reasons. I think they think it's just sexy in the movies, hackers, but loads of people don't even know what kind of pen testing job is. But the thing is, you have to remember, guys, pen testing, like 50% of pen testing job is writing reports. You're not just out there hacking. Any hacking engagement also, you are constrained to scoping exercise, and you have to also be a good communicator. You have to write a great report to explain the vulnerabilities you found, to explain how to fix that and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, bug bounties. Yeah, it's hours of reporting, because half of the time you can find a great bug bounty, but if your report is crap, it's just going to be thrown out. What does Adeline say? Is Google cybersecurity course for Hack Me Plus Security Plus enough to teach me what I need to know? No. You definitely know enough, Adeline. You still need skills, and home lab is the most important thing that you can never bypass. Right, it says people in the military need like 4 years of experience before getting into pen testing or red teaming stuff. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Pen testing is the longest road to get into, and it's hard. But if you're really passionate, if you're really gonna knuckle down and work hard, everything's possible. There's nothing not possible. You just have to believe in yourself. Have a look at the roadmap as a built and outlined what kind of stuff you need to do. There's OSCP, obviously we talk about, but I said if OSCP is too big of a leap from 0, you can do PNPT and stuff like that. What's next? DeepSeek will control our brains. Well, potentially. Yeah. I think the biggest danger now is I see, you know, and I had to write guidance and reports, is the things like cloud co-work. I've just read another report. Cloud co-work, when you install it on your machine, especially on a Mac, it bridges every Chromium browser on your machine and builds extension bypass. So it can basically install any extension on your Chrome browser that it wants without even user knowing. There's so many risks and dangers how you need to build, for example, you know, I'm just building a guidance for my team, what kind of Intune policies and guidelines and global controls we need to put in order to allow people to drop and use cloud co-work. Because there's so much danger. You know, everyone's probably, you guys heard about Vercel hack. That's all happened is because guy, you know, on his personal machine dropped cloud co-work by logged in with his company credentials, then downloaded a malware from Roblox, and it was game over. Is home lab worth making for GRC? Yeah, of course. Not a home lab, but you need projects. You don't necessarily need a home lab for GRC because obviously, you know, you need to learn hacking and stuff like that. But yeah, guys, that's an hour. As always, you know, great pleasure chatting, great questions, great audience. You know, we discussed some great stuff tonight. You know, it's a one way for me, guys, to give back. You know, I always say, you know, yes, I do a lot of videos and I do a lot of stuff, but you know, I can't always answer my DMs in all of the comments. So this is an opportunity for you guys to chat, ask questions, and learn a bit more. But you know, I'm gonna love you and leave you guys. Have an amazing evening. As always, you know, I'm gonna try and do this regular now. So every Tuesday and Thursday is gonna be the days where I'm gonna stream. So keep an eye out. Make sure to, you know, put on notifications. I'm gonna drop the next live streams. But until then, work hard, persevere. Anything is possible, and you can land a role in 2026. Just follow my roadmaps and discipline and work hard. But you know, guys, have a great evening. Until next time.